Welcome to the Echelon AI podcast, the show where we explore the future of professional services as they're transformed by AI and share practical strategies to help businesses and professionals thrive. I'm your host, David, founder of Echelon AI. At Echelon, we help professional service businesses scale using the latest technologies to seize a competitive advantage and leap ahead in this fast-paced world. Today, joining us is Kevin Crowley, agency owner at One Stop Shop Insurance, an independent agency with appointments in over 28 states across the continental US. After starting his career on what he describes as a dare, Kevin has built a highly respected agency known for its strong relationships and reputation within the industry. Through strategic partnerships with mortgage lenders, banks, and real estate offices, Kevin's agency has achieved consistent growth even during challenging times like the COVID pandemic. Kevin, it's great to have you on the show.
It's great to be here, David.
Now, most people within insurance say they ended up in the industry by accident. Maybe 5% of people say it was planned, but you came into the industry on what you describe as a dare. Can you share that story with our audience and how it led to building your successful agency?
Yeah, absolutely. So as a young man, I actually owned another company. It was a business networking association. That association helped businesses grow by introducing them to other businesses. We were, for all intents and purposes, we were a country club for businesses. So we had businesses that came to us that were using our shared office space, using our conference centers, other things like that to be involved in different environments where they could actually grow their business, get to know other businesses. As part of that, there were two gentlemen, one my father-in-law that was an Allstate agent and another one that was an American Family agent. Both had discussed going independent. So rather than just writing for one insurance company, they wanted to be able to write for many. The transition from going as a captive agent, which is writing for one, to an independent can be a little daunting because you're having to start from scratch. You're having to bring over a lot of other personnel, and it doesn't always appeal when you don't have the backing of a company that's always invested in you. What ended up happening is when I got these two together in golf tournaments, at social events, everything that I could to try and get them to pull the trigger and do business with each other, my father-in-law seemed apprehensive. I think more than anything because at the time I was early 30s. What could I know as a punk kid? I really wasn't as wise as he was. And one night in my frustration and complaining to his daughter, my wife, about how unbelievably ignorant I thought he was being and not taking this opportunity, especially with somebody else as a business partner, so he wasn't having to front all of the risk. She said, well, if it's such a good idea, why don't you do it? I thought, challenge accepted. So that became the relationship between me and my former business partner, where we started One Stop Shop Insurance as independent agents and flourished from there.
Amazing. So you took a little of your own advice and it was truly the right advice. I'm just kind of curious, what did your father-in-law have to say with the results that ensued?
Well, there comes the plot twist. He actually found out a few years later kind of what the direction is that we took, my business partner and I, and he actually said at that point, had I known and really understood what the opportunity was for me, I would have taken it. Again, another plot twist. He works for me now. So he is actually one of my agents that works for me in my agency.
Wow, that's cool. I mean, I'm sure you guys have a really great relationship as a result of all that. So that's really incredible. Now, I think you may have answered this question already with what your previous business was, but you've formed some pretty good strategic partnerships through what you're doing. I mean, you're operating out of a mortgage lending institution and a bank, which has connections to the largest Keller Williams office in Utah. How is it that you went about developing these relationships?
One of those was an opportunity that we just took advantage of. Prior to even doing that other business, I was a corporate manager for the Hertz Corporation, working in the local edition realm, meaning that you were actually out in society and actually talking to people, usually dealing with people who had a vehicle that got in an accident. They had to get a rental car by force rather than by pleasure. As part of that, we were always looking for opportunities to be able to undercut the other competition just based off of how well we did our job. So in that aspect, I carried that over with what I did here in insurance. Specifically, I had a couple of requests from some mortgage companies asking if I would do a couple of quotes for clients that they had that they were running into debt to income ratios issues, wherein they were having a hard time qualifying for the loans. They didn't use me typically, but that's wherein I actually challenged them. And I said, okay, do this. Send it to whatever other agent you've been using, or perhaps even the agent that's for your client, and then also send it to me. We'll see who gets it back quicker and who has the better price. When I established that I was able to have a turnaround time much quicker for the lenders, and I was actually able to put their clients into a better position based on, again, their debt to income ratio and their ability to be able to close loans, they decided that I was somebody that they wanted to have around. So they actually sought me out to ask me to come in office with them, and have basically taken me around with them everywhere they've gone to be able to make sure that their clients are being handled as best as possible within their system.
Speaks to the power of relationships and trust.
That it does.
Fantastic. So we know a little bit about how you started. We know a little bit about your current state, these incredible strategic partnerships and relationships that you've built that have you in this position. Let's fill a little bit of the in-between, and then let's look to the future as well. Starting out as an independent agent on your own, you already identified that there's some pretty big challenges there, right? What were some of the challenges that you actually faced starting your agency, and how did you overcome them initially?
One of those is not just the relationships with clients and with your revenue sources. So whether you're marketing, whether you're going to a real estate office, whether you're going to a mortgage company, if you're knocking doors, using the telephone to telemarket, it doesn't matter. All of those people all insurance agents are usually actually expending all of their energy in doing those things. One of the things that I found most productive, that was also one of the most difficult, was getting in really good and having a great relationship with the underwriters. When I first got into this industry, we became part of a larger group, a master agency as it were, wherein there's many of us as independent agents and agencies that are all grouped together. One of the gentlemen that I met with first in that group had asked me about a specific underwriter for one of the carriers and asked if she was going to be ours, and I said yes. And he said, wow, she is so difficult to work with. She never wants to approve anything. She always has a concern or a question, and it's very difficult to write business with them because of it. I reached out again as a challenge to see exactly what he was talking about. The relationship that I actually formed with this underwriter proved to be one of our best. 1 in every 3 policies we wrote through our agency ended up being through that carrier alone, because she knew that I was going to do what we call frontline underwriting, or in other words, I was actually qualifying the clients prior to getting them to her. So rather than her having to ask all the questions that she normally would, she was able to actually just assess the information and make a determination right away. This proved to be very productive through all the different carriers. Any chance and any opportunity that I had to talk to underwriters, I did. More than anything because they had a lot more knowledge than I did. Coming into the industry, being a brand new agent, it was a little daunting, especially when we have 40 plus carriers that we write for. But the underwriters were one of my best sources to be able to overcome all the obstacles, because they would go into depth with what they were actually looking for, how their actual company could benefit the client, and then exactly what the coverages would handle in the event that something did happen, which of course that's prime number 1. Everybody's looking for what's going to happen when I actually have to use the insurance.
This frontline underwriting that you're doing, it sounds like not many people are doing. It's not something I experienced very much in my time as a broker, but it seems like, maybe it requires a little bit more work up front, but it can yield some much better results long term. I mean, look at this one relationship that you built with an underwriter that has referred to you a third of your business that was done. I think you said, yes? Why do you think it is that a lot of agents don't take this approach?
One of the keys to insurance is volume and numbers. Everybody wants to get paid. Everybody gets paid through commissions. And because of that, a lot of them are just looking for the easiest route. So the path of least resistance. I see that a lot within the independent realm especially. Rather than always putting a client where it's going to be best for them, sometimes an agent will overlook that. They'll look to get a policy done as quick as possible, whether that's because of price or because of how well they know the system with that carrier, rather than actually looking for the best option for their clients. To give you an idea, within the insurance industry, there's a lot of companies that turn over. You see companies come and go, names come and go. A lot of the larger companies are always buying up the smaller ones that are up and coming, and they do that because it benefits them by getting market share as well as being able to take on a company that's been doing well. One of the things that also happens, though, is some of those companies over market. They end up actually getting a market share, but by undercutting the rest of the industry. And because of that, when they have losses, they're not able to actually sustain what they're doing. In that case, generally, they either cut ties with everything. In other words, they stop doing the auto and home, for instance, lines of business, or they'll raise prices to where they're basically pricing themselves out of the industry anyway. We've seen that quite a bit. In fact, one of our larger carriers, we were the number one writer for one of the carriers in the state of Utah. We actually were more than double the next agency, and we had roughly about 500 clients there when they decided that they were going to pull out of all but 14 markets around the entire country, Utah being one of those. When we were moving those clients, they actually have to get permission from the state in order to non-renew the actual clients as it comes to the end of their policy period. They were not able to actually get that approved with the state. So rather than them not being able to renew these persons, they had to stay on those policies. Well, it's just so happened that happened to be a company that undercut everybody else. That's one of the reasons why we wrote so many. That's why they were doing so well policy count wise, but they also were upside down in what they were paying out in claims compared to what they were bringing in premium. What ended up happening is we actually left a large portion of those clients with that company because they were less than half the price of almost every other company. So it was in the client's best interest to actually leave them there, but it was actually detrimental to us. Reason why is because they tried to force their hand by doing things like cutting the commissions that we were actually making, dropping them down to 0 or 1%, meaning that we were basically getting paid nothing to be able to handle those clients still. But we did that with the sole purpose of we were looking out for the best interest of the clients. When it finally came to the non-renewal time that they were able to get approved with the state, we actually held on to over 95% of those clients, even though the majority of their policies were going up 2 and 3 times what they had been paying previously. But what they really saw was that we actually cared about them, wanted to have them in the best situation for their current premiums. And because of that, their allegiance was more to us, and they believed that we were going to always do what was in their best interest.
Wow. I mean, again, this speaks volumes to the power of relationships and trust. Right? I mean, I think that it would seem that most people don't trust insurance agents or brokers, right? And it's understandable why. Many people are buying a product that it's not tangible. You can't touch, taste it, smell it, feel it, any of the above. You only are going to use it if something bad happens usually, right? And it's also something that most people don't stand. So if you don't understand something, you can't see it or touch it or taste it or feel it, you probably don't want to pay for it. And if you're using it, it's because something bad is happening. What's left, right? What's your approach for building such strong relationships? Of course, you just gave us a good example of how it is you earn trust by doing what's best for your clients. But if somebody's connecting with you, not from a warm referral, because I'm sure you get many of those, how is it that you break down those initial barriers of maybe mistrust?
Honesty always. Honesty is the best policy. And it's not just honesty that you're going to tell somebody actually what is happening, like what the policy entails, what they're going to get, what could possibly happen, but it's being authentic within that honesty. So I did have a gentleman that used to work for me, one of my agents, and every time that there was a difficult task, like something like talking to somebody about a claim, oftentimes he tried to avoid it. He tried to postpone that. Or perhaps if their renewals were coming up and they had claims, obviously they're a higher risk, and because of it they're going to pay more in insurance, and it was a difficult conversation sometimes to have with somebody that they were going to see an increase of 40 or 50% of what they were already paying. He would avoid that because he didn't like the confrontation. The problem that I had with that is that people like to know what's happening. Whenever they're not in the know and they have that confusion of what could possibly happen without having somebody who's based for them, it's very difficult to do that business. I worked with him quite a bit on reaching out to these clients that if he even had a problem whatsoever, call him up. Say, hey, this is the situation, this is what's going on, and this is what we're doing to remedy. Even if we didn't have an actual remedy at the time, as long as they knew that we were actively working on it, that's where their trust actually began to flourish with us. So they knew without a doubt that even if there was a problem, we were going to step up. Even if something got thrown at them they weren't anticipating, we were going to be there to be able to help them get through it. A lot of agents, because you don't have to, don't do this. When a claim does happen, the most negative things that happen in insurance claims, when they happen, and a claims adjuster is usually the one that handles it, they're going to be on the corporate side, and they're not somebody who deals with that client on a day-to-day basis. They're only there for that claim. And a lot of agents, because they're not licensed adjusters, as we're not really able to do a lot on the claims side for them. But what we can do is mitigate between the frustration and the negative approach that a claims adjuster unfortunately has to handle, which is how much they're going to get paid, how long it's going to take to get it done, what is going to happen between now and then. And by keeping us in touch with them, we can mitigate against those negative feelings and make that experience a lot better. Again, the last thing you want to do is have a claim, because you don't want to have to use your insurance. You'd rather be able to pay it, know that it's there in case something does happen. But if something does happen, then what? And a lot of agents, again, we get this all the time. Somebody calls in, says, hey, I just got in an accident. They say, oh, great, here, let me give you the claims number. And they do. And yeah, the claims adjusters, they'll take care of it. And they try to be as empathetic and sympathetic as they can with people. But of course, their job's taxing, because that's all they do all day is talk to people, usually that are upset because of the situation and are frustrated that things aren't happening as quickly as they can. So that being the case, as an agent that actually prides themselves on making sure the clients understand what's going on, are comfortable with it, and that no matter what happens, I'm here for you to advocate on your behalf, that's really what helps that relationship build, so that those negative instances are minor or at least diminished as much as possible.
Fantastic. So Kevin, you got into insurance on a dare. The dare went well. Right? You built some incredible relationships with underwriters, with clients. You built some great strategic partners, right? You have an amazing network that's built. And as I understand it, you have some plans for growth and expansion as well. You currently have a presence in 28 states. What's driving your expansion? What's your vision for growth over the next 3 to 5 years, maybe?
Well, one of the aspects that I really enjoy is that, yeah, as we get to know more places, more people, we do have that opportunity to build. My father-in-law actually, prior to him being just an agent for Allstate, he was actually the area rep for all of Utah. So he actually went around and appointed agencies and agents to be able to write for Allstate. He oversaw exactly what those agencies were doing, helped them increase in both their business as well as being able to discuss numbers with them. Obviously, as part of the job, he had to terminate some of those also based on their productivity or lack thereof. One of the main reasons why I have my father-in-law working for me at this point is because he has that knowledge. Yes, I've been able to run a successful insurance industry and an insurance agency, but I still don't know all of the ins and outs of scaling that, specifically within the industry, to other locations. Because of that, I'm going to be using his wealth and knowledge of the insurance industry in order to increase our productivity by getting more agencies, whether that's taking ones that are already established or building them from scratch also within the different states.
So you're looking at growing, and it sounds like you're going to grow pretty rapidly, right? You have a system to do it. You have your father-in-law who has experience and who can definitely bring you the insight and perspective you need within these different states. But when it comes to maintaining the relationships that are fundamental to your agency and what you're doing, what are some of your plans or thoughts on how it is you're going to maintain the quality of these relationships and the client delivery as you expand and grow?
That is, I think, a fear of every single business owner, hands down. It's always, how can I replicate this and how can I do it? Right now, for instance, everybody that calls in, generally speaking, my staff says it all the time, they all want to talk to you. They all want to have your input because they trust you. And getting that trust amongst your other employees and anybody that works for you, that is a fear. It is a fear because, yeah, you don't want the quality of what you give out to the public to be diminished. You don't want to have people getting lost by the wayside and that your reputation go downhill because you weren't either able to teach somebody the way that you've done it, or at least impress upon them that they need to handle things with the type of kid gloves, as it were, that they need to. So honestly, that's part of my difficulty myself, is how do I replicate myself? I do have some staff, and Anybody who's been in business knows this. There's some staff that just are going to be better than others. Some of them are really good at one particular thing, or many, whereas they might not be good at others. And so it's always finding that balance between how many do I need to hire, how many do I need to put in position, and what exactly training do I need to do with those in order for them to be able to handle and to react as I would. And that's really what it comes down to. The thing that I love the most is when there is an issue. One of my staff comes to me and they say, this is how I handled it, this is what was said, this is exactly what transpired. And if it's something I would have said, I say, great, that's awesome. We need to continue to do it just like that. If it doesn't, then obviously there needs to be some corrections. And that in business should be expected. You should always be expected to have some sort of criteria and some criticism that you're actually willing to actually take so that you can better yourself, whether that's in the industry you're in or even just in general in life. Because again, people are going to see through it. If you're not being authentic with them, if you're not being real with them, if you're not being honest with them, you can't do the other things because they'll see right through it.
So, this challenge of replicating yourself in your staff, and it sounds like, obviously there's always going to be coaching and correction necessary, but it sounds like you're doing a pretty good job so far. If people are coming to you, letting you know that they had a challenge, but this is how they solved it. I think any mentor really wants to see and hear that. But as you said, this is one of the biggest challenges of any business owner, right? How is it that I can make sure that people will deliver what I'm passionate about in the same way with the same passion, right? Other than this, because it is a significant challenge, would you say that is the biggest challenge that you're up against, scaling operations across multiple states? Or are there other things that, you really need to be focusing on beyond just your staff?
Within our industry, probably not a whole lot. I mean, there's always going to be the nature of the business of different risks. So again, insurance is all risk-based. It always has been, always will be. We're going to have different risks here than they have in California. For instance, in California, they have earthquakes just like we do in Utah. In fact, I haven't looked at all the statistics, but I would guess that we probably have more than they do. On average, Utah has more than 600 earthquakes a year. But the majority of those, we don't even notice. Our fault lines are very active. They move vertically, so they're always constantly moving, and we don't see very large ones, generally speaking, a lot. On the other hand, California does. Their fault lines are a little bit more sedentary, and so when they jump big, and because of it, it can do a lot of damage. Now, you're just going to have to take those as it comes. So whether you're talking about Tornado Alley in the west, or you're talking about earthquakes on the coast, or you're talking about the freezing temperatures up in Michigan, things are just going to come at you as they would from a risk standpoint. But the staffing itself, that's the key. Because again, regardless of what gets thrown at you, you have to have personnel in there, or you have to have systems in place that will allow for you to be able to handle that as it comes. Because if you can't, that's where you will actually end up folding.
People are fundamental. Staff, clients, relationships, the relationships that are between them, right? Especially when it comes to growing your business. I also know you have some thoughts and beliefs around AI never being able to replace an agent, but being able to enhance what those agents can offer. Is this part of your strategy or plan for scaling moving forwards, enhancing the team that you've been building? Or is your primary focus just really building the team and maybe everything else will start coming together?
No, I think you actually hit on something I've been contemplating a lot. AI, as it's becoming more and more prevalent within our society, within everything that we do and everything that we see, you can tell that there's going to be some advantages to using it. There are going to be some advantages to having it within your systems. I was fearful, like a lot of persons within the industry, that AI would basically just overtake us. Specifically that they'd be able to write policies faster than we would. They'd be able to perhaps answer calls and general questions a lot quicker than we could, especially at the volume that a computer could actually do that at. So there was definitely a fear, especially when it started to really come into the forefront of everything that's happening within our society. And my fear again was, is this going to run me out of the business? Is this going to make me obsolete? The more that I've looked at it, the more I realize there are some intangibles that we have as humans. The ability that we actually have to be able to talk to somebody, to empathize with them, to sympathize with them. There's a difference between somebody who's actually had a experience that they can relate to, going through an accident, something like that, and just somebody that's saying something, or in this case, or a computer that just repeats slogans or sayings to make you feel a little bit better. Generally, people see through that too. Anytime you've gotten a robocall that has a voice on the other end that sounds like it might be human, pretty quickly you can usually tell it's not quite. Now, does that mean that it's good or bad? Not necessarily, but what I have noticed is that as that technology comes into play, and as some of that stuff can be handled by AI, that actually is to our benefit. Those relationships that we build, that trust that we build with the clients, yeah, AI might be able to do some of the busy work for us, the policy side of stuff, the writing of things and the explaining even of those policies in a way that's going to be a little bit more articulate than perhaps a lot of us can actually say or express. But at the same time, that frees us up to be able to have the relationships that we need. The ones where, okay, when something does happen and they need something more than just an answer, that we can actually build that relationship with them. And they can see both that they're getting perhaps all of the information, all of the data, everything that comes from AI, but then they're also getting the personalized side of an agent who actually does care and wants to make sure they're taken care of, not just on paper, but throughout, whether you're talking about their soul, their heart, their mind, that they can be put at ease because they know that there is somebody there that is working for them still. And it isn't just a computer that hopefully gets it right.
Yeah, that human touch is incredibly important, especially with the perspective, right? As you were saying, right? Sharing a story, not just putting out slogans or sayings or something that's pulled online, but actually being able to empathize with a person and say, hey, I've been there. I know what that feels like, and I can relate to you. I can identify with you, because people can't identify with computers, right? At least not yet. That'll be a bit of a scary time. So, Kevin, you don't have any concerns about AI replacing agents, but do you have any concerns about AI adoption in the industry in general?
I think the hesitation from a lot of agents is going to be justified in that anything new is difficult. I deal with agents that have been agents for 30, 40 years at this point, and a lot of them are still using antiquated systems or methods just because it was something that's more comfortable for them. So as it's coming into play, yeah, there's going to be those that are going to be negatively impacted just based on the fact that they're going to fight it. Other ones that are going to completely embrace it, and I think both ways aren't necessarily correct. Fighting it puts yourself in a position that's going to be worse than everybody else because you don't have the availability of it. Relying solely on it, again, I think is detrimental based on the fact that now you're not being specific to the actual clientele or anybody that you're working with, or whether, again, that's banks or real estate agents, lenders, those type of things. Because if you're relying solely on somebody else to do the work, it's the exact same as if you were just pawning that person off onto that adjuster. They can see through that. They know what it is. They want to have some personalized touch. Even in our industry, they talk about this all the time, that even when somebody goes online, does a quote themselves through any company, whether that's a rating system that's putting it out to a bunch or individually through a direct company, 80% of them are still calling an agency after because, as you had said before, a lot of people don't understand this. And there's a lot to insurance, so I don't expect them to. But what I do expect them to do is find somebody that they can believe and trust in, and that knows they're going to actually help them through this whole process, whether that's getting the policy, getting through a claim, adding drivers, making sure that they're covered.
Now, with these things considered, your stance on AI, your concerns and your non-concerns, what type of AI implementations or tools or capabilities do you think are going to be the most beneficial or that you're most excited about with your goals?
More than anything, we'll call it busy work for lack of another word. It's right now, just because of volume, the number of clientele and everything that we have, there's a lot of work that has to be done, a lot of maintenance of policies. So people are calling in constantly looking to add vehicles. They're not really changing anything else. They want their vehicles to have the exact same coverage as the other vehicles on the policy, but that takes time. It takes somebody that's making sure that it's done correctly, that the VINs are correct on there, the vehicle identification numbers, and that everything matches up. Having AI or something that can actually handle those things, that can have a fairly personalized experience in that somebody can give them the information, they can repeat it back, they can make sure that things are correct as they should be on the policy, that's great. That's something that, again, alleviates me from having to do that work, or one of my staff, and then we can handle some of the more delicate situations that are going to take a personal touch. and are going to need that in order to make sure that they're comfortable and feeling like they are, again, as valuable as we see them.
Kevin, if you could give one piece of advice to other agency owners who are looking to expand their operations, but also focusing on maintaining quality service and relationships, what would that advice be?
First and foremost, treat people how you want to be treated. That's rule of thumb number one. Nobody likes to get yelled at. Nobody likes to feel like they're not being listened to. So you need to listen. You need to get to the bottom of exactly what any issue is or exactly what somebody needs. If somebody calls in to, again, get a vehicle added, and it's something very difficult for them to do with you, then you perhaps need to revisit how you're handling those clients and how you're actually presenting yourself to them. Now, within the industry, obviously, everybody who's an agent is my competition, even within the groups that we're a part of, just because anybody who writes somebody who I can't write or don't write, obviously is a client that I've missed. But the same statement that you made, that there's a lot of distrust in insurance and insurance agents and agencies, if we could all work together in making sure that people are educated, knowing what they're getting, and able to make informed decisions, that's where we'll all thrive. Because when people aren't coming into a situation already anticipating that you're not going to tell them the whole truth or you're not going to be honest with them, it's difficult because you have to break down those barriers in order to build them back up. So you're looking at what you can do to be able to help these people. And if you can't get across that wall to begin with, it's very difficult. So more than anything within our industry, if people will be honest, be authentic, and help in giving all of us a better name, it's beneficial for all of us. So even though we are competitors, we have the ability to be able to help each other just by the way that we act, react, and we're able to talk to people.
I love that sound advice, Kevin. Thank you so much for joining the show today.
Thank you.
For our listeners who might want to connect with you or to learn more about your agency, what would be the best way to reach out?
We're able to be found online at 1ssinsurance.com. That stands for One Stop Shop Insurance. They can also reach our office whenever you need. We happen to be a little bit different from most agents. A lot of times you will call in. Most of my clients actually do have my cell phone. That's a little daunting too, but I have helped people at 3, 4 in the morning before that called me thinking that they were just going to get a message, leave me a message, and instead I'm answering on the call. Obviously that's not always feasible, but more than anything, we like to be available for them. If there's ever an issue, we like for somebody to leave a message, because even after hours, we're checking those, making sure that people are being taken care of. But yeah, they can reach us at our main office in Roy, Utah, and online you can find all the information for that.
Fantastic. To the listeners, thank you for tuning into the Echelon AI podcast. As always, I hope this episode has brought you valuable insight, knowledge, and inspiration. If it did, please would you show your support by liking this video and subscribing to the channel. Until next time, we're signing off.